Mr. Shea, my questions are along the lines of what you just spoke to, corporate governance issues. I do agree with your testimony. I agree with the premise of this hearing that we should resist the policies of the Chinese government that are harming our economy. They're harming American workers, our ability to take advantage of our own investments in innovation. But I wonder if we are naive to think that the corporations that are subject to this are truly American corporations, that they really do want to resist, that they really are being bullied into doing something contrary to the interests of the American economy, and and they really want to do that. In the last presidential campaign, for all the talk of small business, which I think we should encourage, you would think that we were a nation of yeoman farmers and shopkeepers and artisans, when in fact our economy is being dominated by enormous corporations, increasingly enormous corporations. The Economist ran a piece on that just 2 or 3 weeks ago. And they're not really American corporations. They may be incorporated in Delaware, but they are international. They're national in the scope of their operations. They're international in their ownership. There was a piece this morning or yesterday in a publication, an Internet publication called Business Insider by Henry Blodgett that said a theme that I've heard before, that a generation ago American corporations saw themselves as having a variety of stakeholders, including their own workers, including the communities in which they had operations, including their own country. They were American corporations. And that has now been replaced completely by a philosophy, or at least a stated philosophy, that everything that corporate management did should be in the interest of making more profit. Is it the case that corporations are going to take into account at all the interests of the American economy? Should they? And how do we make that so?
Well, that is a very big statement. I will say, you know, Clyde Prestowitz has written a book on this issue. Which
You've got 2 minutes and 25 seconds to answer that.
Okay. We got the pressures. Corporations are with American corporations are undoubtedly expanding. Their operations are moving on a global basis. I don't think we can expect U.S. companies to ignore 2.5 billion consumers in China and India. I completely appreciate the desire of U.S. companies to reach out to these markets and to tap into that consumer base. The question is, what about our own productive capacity? What about our own manufacturing capacity? How does that diminish it? And again, our commission looks at the U.S.-China relationship. We don't look at U.S. domestic policies or U.S. corporate governance policies. That's not something that we feel was within our commission's mandate. But I think you raised some very good points. Do the interests of large corporations converge with the interests of the United States government? It used to be said that what's good for GM is good for America. Is that necessarily true today? Again, this is not something that these are not the types of issues that, I'm copping out here, sir, but these are not the issues that the Commission itself looks at. But I think you have raised some valid points that deserve exploration. And there is been some good work on corporate governance issues by people like Prestowitz, by people like Ralph Gomery, and others who have some very strong opinions on these matters.
Yeah, so
Atkinson, yeah.
When I got my PhD in North Carolina back in the 80s, I was involved a lot with the state government.
You're playing to your audience now. It's very
exactly. But I will note one of the things that North Carolina built its economy on after World War II and even through the 80s was the movement of firms from the North, who frankly had no loyalty to the North. They were Michigan companies or Delaware companies or Massachusetts companies. They came down to North Carolina because the business climate was good. We're seeing that same dynamic today all around the world, and I think we can like it or we can not like it. I really don't think there's anything we can do about it. I think fundamentally it's incumbent upon us to do two things. One is to make the U.S. business environment the best in the world, which means in part protecting our multinational companies from these pressures and this extortion that they're facing overseas. But secondly, we have the highest corporate tax rate in the world now. The 27th worst R&D tax credit. We haven't funded science and research the way other competitors have. So I think we've got to do much more of that. Just on this point about what the company's interests are, there's a very good book by a finance professor at Northwestern that came out last year called Saving Capitalism from Short-Termism. And his argument is that the role of companies is to maximize shareholder value. The problem is that U.S. companies increasingly maximize short-term shareholder value, not long-term net present value shareholder value. And that's exactly the dynamic we see in China. So I think dealing with corporate governance is important, but I don't think we have to sacrifice or get rid of the notion that companies are there to make a profit. They're just under pressures to make the wrong kind of profit, I would argue today.